And hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Copter Cast. I am joined today by Jed Jackoway of We Are Fuzzy,
Hello, everyone.
and yeah, I'll start things off with the very basic: who you are and what you do.
So my name is Jed Jackoway, and I am the one of the two developers and the gameplay director at We Are Fuzzy, who
Hmm.
just released our first game, Sleep Tight.
Yeah. So, yeah, how did you come to work for We Are Fuzzy? Or
So
yeah.
the other developer, Max Berman, and I grew up together. We've known each other since we were 9, and played games together growing up. Kind of always had this vague dream to make a game someday. And after going our separate ways after high school, Max became a visual effects artist, and I became a full-time developer. Kind of circled back, and we're like, "Huh, we actually do have the correct skill set to go ahead and take a stab at this."
Okay. So, so, yeah, how has gaming influenced your life? Have you been like a gamer since you were a little kid, or is it like only when you started like working on them like as a career that you like started to get into it?
No, I've played games my whole life. The only like I've always played games, alone with my friends. Never really got, except for a brief period in middle school, never really got into like competitive gaming online and stuff. One of my big rules for a game is that a good game is fun for me to lose. And with like online shooters and stuff like that, I feel like when I'm winning, I'm having a good time. But as soon as I die, I never want to play the game again. So
Mm-hmm.
that to me, I'm like, okay, not games for me. But the only thing that's really changed is that I used to be all video games, and now I'm like half video games and half board games.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So, yeah, if we were at like PAX or something like that right now, and you were one of the people like man in the booth, and I don't I don't know, just absolutely not a description of me, but of some person with a huge red afro and an autograph book filled with many game dev autographs from various conventions were to come up to you and ask you what Sleep Tight was, like what would be like your breakdown of it?
So in Sleep Tight, you play as a kid defending your bedroom from monsters that come out to get you every night.
Hmm.
And mechanically, it oscillates between two modes. During the nighttime, which is timed, it is a top-down twin stick shooter, and you're just trying to survive until morning. During the daytime, it is an untimed game, and it's kind of like a base builder tower defensey sort of thing, and you get 8 suns every day to allocate to building walls and turrets, getting ammo, activating power ups, and healing yourself. Or you can combine suns with stars, which are sort of like XP that is dropped by monsters, to research bigger walls and turrets, new weapons, new power ups, static abilities, kind of whatever you want. And we have 12 unlockable characters. And that all have different abilities. 5 of them actually have different gameplay modes. So what I was just describing there was the base game, but some of them play differently. And you're trying to survive as long as you can.
Okay. So, yeah, so when you say it's a combination of tower defense and, like twin stick shooting, I mean, I've already played this, but just to be clear, when you, like, both of those things happen at the same time when you get to the part where you're shooting all the monsters, yeah?
Yes, indeed. And depending on how you spend your days, the game might be entirely a twin stick shooter where you're really relying on your own skill, or you could not be moving at all. You could set yourself up during the day where at nighttime you just sit and you watch your big machine mow down monsters.
Okay. So, like, what other video games or movies or books or just anything like in the sphere of entertainment, like gave you the idea for the shtick of the game?
So I think from a creative perspective, I think we're pretty obviously influenced by Pixar and in particular Monsters Inc.
Mm-hmm.
What if the monsters are real? And then I haven't stated this yet, but all the weapons are toys. You're killing them with super soakers and dart guns. Um, so I think that's been a big influence on us, especially Max, who has worked in the film industry, and in fact, some of the artists have worked on Max's. Me and Max are the developers, but Max has kind of called in some friends to contribute a few assets here and there who he's worked with on projects like Wreck-It Ralph and Zootopia. So that art style and that more than the art style, I think that like ambiance maybe is the kind of the word that I'm going for is really kind of influenced the game a lot. Um, Mechanically, uh, actual the reason the game is kind of how it is mechanically is I was building the original prototype of Sleep Tight, which I built 7 years ago with some friends from college. They wanted to make a top-down twin-stick shooter, pretty traditional one. You killed zombies, and I was bored out of my mind by the like idea of doing that, which was not a great attitude, but that's neither here nor there. So I sort of like I was like, well, what if during the daytime you had to get ready for the next night because the zombies are going to come back? And then we just ended up really like investing really heavily in that. And I mean, I'm sure you've played Sleep Tight now. I
Mm-hmm.
like to say that you do play the game during the nighttime and you shoot monsters and stuff, but the real game is kind of the daytime. And nighttime, you almost are getting to see how well you did during the day.
Oh. So yeah, but earlier you mentioned that you're like one of the major like devs on the game. Just as someone who knows literally nothing about like the meat and potatoes of making a game, like how would you like describe like the day to day process of like making Sleep Tight from when you actually started like putting it together to like its launch?
Um, so both Max and I, for most of it, had other full-time jobs that we were going to. So we would, get home from our jobs. We would G chat for 15 minutes, figure out who needed to do what, and then it's really just like, and actually, so the answer to this question is it depends. For someone like Max, who's not really a developer, there's a lot of like Googling and forum searching and going really deep into like, how do I do this thing? Like just kind of learning to code on the fly, which to Max's credit, I say he's not really a developer, but he's done a phenomenal job. And he wrote half the code of the game and he did a great job. So kudos to him. And then for me, who is a developer, it's kind of like just a lot of late nights getting stuff done. It's a lot of banging your head against a computer. You know what? I discard all of that. It's a lot of banging your head against a computer.
Yeah. Like how long from like the initial like conception of the idea to like last week when the game officially launched, like how long was the total just making it all, putting it all together?
So the prototype was 7 years ago. Me and three other friends built that in maybe 3 months, and then we didn't do anything at that for 4 years. I mean, a lot of people played it. Like Max was sharing it with all his friends, and they kept like getting addicted to it. And then 3 years ago, almost exactly, Max came to me and was like, "Dude, we gotta make this prototype the thing." And I have this theme that I think would be perfect for it. When he had the idea of defending your bedroom, and that's when we started like in earnest in Unreal making this game. We've gone a lot faster this year since we've both been close to full time on Sleep Tight, but up till this year, like I said, we were very much coming home and working on Sleep Tight for a couple hours here and there to try to grind it out.
Okay. So, So, like we said at the very beginning, and as everyone else who's interested in this game knows, it's a hybrid twin stick shooting and tower defense, and I have I haven't really seen a whole lot of that particular type of genre mashup. The only one I can think of that's vaguely similar is Double Fine's Iron Brigade, which is like a third person shooter game slash tower defense. So what I'm
Okay.
getting to is what made you decide to take like twin stick shooting when you're like running around an area, shooting the enemies and trying desperately not to die, and like tower defense, like I don't know, the like running around shooting things and placing state objects that stay at a fixed point and like shoot things that come within their radius. What made you? I'm bad at words. What made you
No,
decide to
I
like
gotcha.
mash those two things together?
Um, yeah, so like I was saying, the mechanics of Sleep Tight are very much inherited from this prototype, and we've made them more complicated and expanded on them in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
But a lot of this goes back to that prototype where I kind of got roped into building a twin stick shooter, and I didn't really want to, so I kind of just started injecting this daytime system into it, and everything kind of just grew organically from there. It was like, well, what do you do during the day? It's like, well, you got to scavenge for more ammo, and you could build barricades. And then we started building barricades, and it was like, well, what else can you build? It's like, well, maybe you can build an automated turret. And then, you just kind of you do that a lot of times. Some of the ideas were stupid. Like we had, there was a portion of time where the idea was, well, you stay up all night fighting zombies, so you have to sleep for some portion of the day, or you just never sleep. And the way we simulated that is we just took away an arbitrary portion of your health at the end of every night, so that you'd have to spend some hours resting to get it back, which like thematically makes sense, but also this isn't real life. It's a game, and it was a terrible gameplay mechanic. So there's a lot of things like that that went out the window. But ultimately, there was never a decision to just be like, I like genres, let's mash them together. It just kind of is where we ended up.
Okay. So, at PAX East this year, when I like ran into the booth and chat up one of the people manning the various demo stations, and like you just a few minutes ago mentioned that it's like they mentioned like a heavily inspired like sort of Pixar visual style. So could you elaborate as to like what specifically that means for this game?
So I think Max can speak to that better than I can because he's the creative director. But I
Hmm.
think I can tell you a little what he would say. So when we started this project, he had just got done. He'd been working on Iron Man, he was working on Game of Thrones, and he'd been working on Far Cry. And he said he was tired of making gritty, dark things, and he just wanted to make something nice that made people feel good. Um, and we knew kind of at this point what the mechanics were going to be, and we liked the idea of juxtaposing like a friendly aesthetic with a pretty punishing mechanical system. We thought that was kind of fun. And it's also just, the building pillow forts in your room and fighting with super soakers and playing pretend is, I think, everyone either is a kid or has been a kid. And I think it's something that everyone can relate to in one way or another.
Okay. So it's time for my favorite question, which absolutely everyone understands perfectly and has never led to any confusion in any of my interviews. And anyone who says differently is a liar. In your opinion, is video games?
Of course.
Yeah, there you go. So the game is currently out, and like the major platforms it is on are Steam and the Nintendo Switch. Which,
Indeed.
quick tangent, as like I was gonna buy this game anyway, just because at PAX the premise, like the idea was good, but just hearing like that it was coming to the Switch, since that's like I think my favorite console ever now, for obvious reasons, just made me wanna get right to it. So I could like Steam, I can understand, because even though like a lot of it's gotten quite a bit of flack for its some at times less than stellar quality control and letting actual games like yours sometimes get buried in the heap of games made by people who don't know how to make games. But Steam is one of the most major platforms. But what made you decide to bring Sleep Tight to the Switch?
We felt like it was a really good fit for Switch. Aesthetically, I don't want to say it looks like a Nintendo game because that's kind of a very like self-important thing to say. But I will say that it aesthetically, like a lot of the design choices we made, are coming from similar places to what I think a lot of Nintendo games are. Um, and then also, ultimately, the unit of play in Sleep Tight, like the amount that you like need to sit down and play, is a minute long. Nights last a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So for a portable console, that's perfect. You can pick it up, you can play through, your 17 nights on the subway or whatever it is, and then you can put it in your backpack and you pick it up whenever you want. So like it doesn't a full run, if you're really good, might take an hour and a half or 2 hours, and if you're not as good, it'll be less. But it doesn't at all demand that you do that in one sitting.
Okay. So, just like every other game I have on the Switch, just being able to when I come home, just plug it in and bam, it's like Sleep Tight's ready to go on the TV. Is just it never stops being awesome, no matter what Switch game it is. So before we get to the final quote unquote official question, in a few days, leading up to the launch, the Sleep Tight team had quite the live stream event counting down to the launch. So just again, I've this podcast is probably at least for quite a few years the closest I've come to being anywhere near the game industry. What made you decide to go with having a live stream event for a few days earlier in the week up into the game's launch?
Well, I think a lot of it for us is that we're a small indie studio. This is our first game,
Mm-hmm.
and we're really proud of what we built, but we have to show it off to people. And I think streaming is a really, really, and I've learned a lot about streaming this year, but I think it's a really great way to do that. And the reason I like streaming so much as kind of a means of doing that is that it feels very I don't know what word I'm looking for. I'm going to say honest, but I'm not sure that's the right word. But when you watch a streamer play a game, it's very much like you're getting the experience of the game. The streamer is playing the game. They're talking about the game. You've presumably chosen to watch a streamer who kind of you are on the same page with. So it's a really organic way to intake the game. And other than playing it, it's probably the closest experience to playing it. So I really like streaming as a way to show off the game because we don't have to say well, here's what it's like. Here's why you might like it. You can just know well, my streamer likes stuff like this, and not my streamer, but these streamers that I like to watch like games for these reasons, and they're talking about them, and either you're gonna know whether you connect with the game or not. And I get watching some streamers. There's a lot of streamers who talk about how adorable everything is, and then there was Alistair, who, when he was streaming the game, his chat was, running all the numbers on the exponential growth rates of different things and giving him advice for, which things he should buy next. And it's cool because those are two audiences that are going to appreciate different things, but they would both appreciate Sleep Tight, and streaming is a really great way for them to both kind of interact with the game in the way they want to.
Okay. So just regretting not putting some of these questions on my list, since I'm just thinking of them now. But I managed to catch I don't know, the first portion of the first evening, at least on my side of the stream, and just but is you mentioned that the game, quote unquote, doesn't end, and that it's kind of like, I don't know, Pac-Man, where you keep playing until eventually, like, either the universe collapses or you die. So is that true? Is that
Uh,
one of those, like, endless kind of games?
so yes and no. As far as like explicit goals, there's 12 unlockable characters, so you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
unlock all the characters, and there's different challenges to unlock them. So that's like one level of beating the game, so to speak. And then we also give you a grade with each character, so you can get through an F up to an A, or you can get an S. So you can try to get an S grade with every character, and that's like another level of beating the game. And then we have competitive leaderboards, which go well beyond what we call an S. So that's kind of another way to interact with the game. And I think that there's going to be people who like Sleep Tight because they can pick it up and it's easy, and they can kill some monsters for a couple hours, and that'll be the game to them. And then I think there's people who, and there already are people who are doing this, who are going to get really into fighting their way up those leaderboards. But in terms of a single run, there is no end. Depending on when you ask me, I'll tell you that either Sleep Tight is a game about remembering your childhood and playing pretend, or I'll tell you that Sleep Tight is a game about how life keeps getting harder and then you die.
Okay. So, like, you mentioned that Sleep Tight is We Are Fuzzy's like very first game. So, and I know like the dust is still settling since like the launch happened like just a few days ago. But has there been any talk amongst you or like any other members of the team as to what other genres you might be interested in exploring somewhere down the road?
Uh, we are very much in the middle of Sleep Tight right now,
Yeah.
still, for a while, so we try not to talk about that. Um, I definitely, Max and I have discussed it, and we have a basic idea of what we think it would be cool to do. But everything's going to be contingent on how this goes and how much support we have with this, and where we succeed and where we fail and what we learn.
Okay. So, So since you've been with the game since it was like since like the very foundation was laid, like, do you have a particular favorite character or loadout or play style that, like, if you were like one of those streamers that tries to like go as far as they possibly can, like, do you have a favorite loadout of anything?
Yeah, in terms of like what I believe the best strategy is, like how I think you're supposed to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I do. I don't want to give too much detail, but there is a lot of stuff you can do to invest in the long term, and there's a lot of stuff you can do to invest in keeping yourself alive. And you should not spend resources on keeping yourself alive unless you're going to die, because you could instead be spending them on the long term, which, if you're not about to die, is going to pay off. Because at some point, the thing you need to buy to keep yourself alive is going to be too expensive, and that's when you're going to die.
Okay. And there's one last question about the gameplay before we like wrap up this train wreck of an interview. So like during the day phase, you use your resources not just to like buy things and set them up, but also to unlock the ability to buy things and set them up.
Yeah.
So like if say during like one run with a freshly unlocked character, you unlock the ability to like build a certain kind of turret, and then you die, and then you start a fresh run with that character. Would you have to rebuy the ability to unlock and buy like those items? Like if I
Yes.
okay,
So everything's going to reset on a game by game basis, and we talked about a lot of ways to like maybe add some sorts of long-term progression to the game, and we tested a lot of it, and I don't want to say it was bad, but it started to feel like a different game that might be a good game,
Hmm.
but it would be a very different game, and I would be interested in exploring how that game would turn out to be. But in January we didn't have time to reevaluate what our game fundamentally was. So um, the way that the long term progression happens is with the characters, and it's like, for example, you're talking about building stuff. Rosie, who's the builder character, does start with light turrets unlocked every game. So
Hmm.
if you are doing a building strategy, you can play as Rosie, and you don't have to do that. But yeah, I actually we have some cool ideas about how that would work. We can only make one game, and that was going to be a different game. So I don't know if it's a good game yet. I didn't really have the time to dig into it.
Um, okay, this is as someone who's like, just barely scratched the surface of the game. This is gonna come in handy when I start getting into the meat and potatoes of it. So, and yeah, that brings us to the end of this particular episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast. I would like to thank Jed Jackoway for joining me and just balance his professionalism, balancing out the fact that I'm a nervous, stammery amateur who has no idea what they're doing.
Well, thank
So,
you for having me, Tyler. It's been fun talking to you.
thank you. And yeah, Sleep Tight. It is on Steam and the Nintendo Switch. I believe for like in the Americas for $14.99. That's $14.99, and I'm assuming like the equivalent of that in other parts of the world.
Yes, it is. I don't know those numbers offhand, but it should match up pretty well.
Um, okay, so yeah, there'll be a link to the Sleep Tight website in the description in case any of the -7 people listening to this are interested in checking it out. And
And
yeah,
can I actually
up,
say something to them too?
up, go ahead.
Yeah, if you're interested in if you have any feedback or questions or anything like that about the game, we have a Discord that you can join, or you can find us on social media, and we're listening.
Okay, so yeah, this has been the Pumpkin Copter Cast, a good old podcast about video games, and thank you all for listening.